upheaval, disquiet about politics and politicians as well, because people will feel let down. Democracy has been let down.
That's Priti Patel listening to that. Gillian Keegan. She called for more honesty from people in government, but she shared the frustration that the Tory chairman, Brandon Lewis, expressed this morning among grassroots members and activists. This inaction over Brexit is causing enormous damage to the Conservative Party, isn't it? That damaging morale, damaging incentive to go out and work and campaign for your party.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's very difficult. I'm not sure I'd call it inaction. There's been lots of action, but there haven't been the results from that action. So there's been many, many activities. There's been many different attempts, many different negotiations, and obviously a 2-year negotiation with the European Union. So I'm not sure I'd say it's inaction. But what we haven't managed to do is to get over the line and get an agreement. And, you know, if you take a step back, I've always thought that trying to make a big constitutional change and a change to your economy and trading relationship, probably one of the biggest over the last 50 years in a hung parliament, is, you know, almost nuts, to be honest. It's so difficult to imagine. All you need is 5 or 10 people in any direction with a different view to knock you off track. And, you know, and that's what we're seeing.
But, you know, the referendum...
And she's one of them, by the way.
Yeah, but Theresa May called the election, which led to the even tighter situation in terms of numbers. So, you know, you could say that she has stored up these problems for herself. Even the prospect now of having to fight European elections is not shifting people like Priti Patel from their opposition to the withdrawal agreement, because your argument would be, wouldn't it, that if you put the withdrawal agreement through, then you can move on to the next stage of Brexit. But how do you convince somebody like Priti Patel to do that? Because they still don't think it's worth supporting, even with the prospect of the European elections looming.
I know. You know, logic is being defied here. And I've often looked at, you know, why did Theresa May call that election? And I think it's probably because there was only a majority of 16 and we have 34 rebels. And she probably anticipated, maybe not 34, but more than 16, which is why she tried to get a bigger majority to try to get a better position for this negotiation. She probably anticipated a lot of this. So right now, obviously now, I speak to many of these people and you know, I can't understand it, because you try to put a logical view forward. And even if you look into, she says, you know, this is a terrible agreement. Actually, I've read these 597 pages many times. I've had a long business career, and I can apply them, and I can apply the political declaration. I can see how it would work with industries. It's not a bad way to withdraw yourself from the European Union whilst keeping the economy in place. So it's a process, not an event. And, you know, nobody ever pretended, I don't think, that it was a single event.
But just briefly, what do you hold out any hope at all of getting the withdrawal agreement and the withdrawal agreement bill through by the 22nd of May?
I have to continue to hope, and I think we all should continue to hope, because actually, logically, this would be done. If we had have had a different parliamentary arithmetic, this would have been done, and nobody would have heard hardly anything about it. It is the trouble, but you know, it's almost defined a nation now. You can hardly go anywhere without people being leavers or remainers, and it's defined us. And actually, we would have heard almost nothing about it if it wasn't for the hung parliament.
Well, I disagree with that. I think we would have heard quite a lot about it, because you need to remember that 2 out of the 4 nations in the United Kingdom voted to remain, including Scotland and Northern Ireland. And there would have always been the problem about the border, which couldn't have been ignored even if Theresa May had had a majority to bulldoze her through her deal. So I think that's a very narrow view of the situation, not really taking into account all the nations of the UK.
But the border is dealt with in the withdrawal agreement.
Well, I agree with Joanna. The border is something that has not been discussed enough, either during the referendum or, frankly, until quite recently since.
Well, that has been a sticking point, and people like Priti Patel will say, well, there are ways, there are arrangements that can be made to get over that border issue. We won't go into those now because we have discussed them on other programmes. But Meg Hillier, just to turn to you, and thanks, Joanna, for chipping in there. Labour's got its own problem with the European elections. I mean, if they go ahead, your campaign literature, is it going to contain a commitment to another referendum or not? Because we heard, didn't we, that a draft didn't contain a mention of a referendum, and you have asked.
Absolutely. And I think, we just remember, of course, this has all happened in a much more of a rush than we'd expect. And we are a party where these decisions are made by our National Executive Committee. It will meet on Tuesday. And I do very much hope it will include a position to have a vote, a confirmatory vote on any deal that goes to the public. And then that seals it once and for all. But it also is very clear, I think, when you go into an election, you have to have very clear positions. And